Today, I've partnered up with Realme to show you guys two of the new Realme 7 series smartphones which are available in the UK from today. You ready? Let's go. So as you probably guessed from the thumbnail and the title of the video, I'm going to be doing a sort of comparison between the 7 and the 7 Pro. I'll also show you guys some camera comparisons, a really short one at the end of the video, so make sure you stick around to the end for that. But let's kick this off by looking at the sort of top level specs, the key specs that you guys need to know about. But before we get into that, you know what's really going to blow your mind is the price of these devices. But anyway, let's start with the Realme 7. We'll go through the specs first, then I'll tell you the price. So the base variant of this phone starts with 4GB of RAM and 64GB storage. But you can go up to 8GB and 128GB storage if you want, which is the same as what the Pro has. But anyway, inside is the MediaTek Helio G95 gaming chipset, and it can withstand some pretty heavy duty gaming. And to complement that gaming experience further, you've got this 6.5-inch IPS 405 pixels per inch display with a 90Hz refresh rate. Now that is a big deal, and if you don't know what refresh rate is, essentially it's how many times the screen refreshes in a second, and the more times it refreshes, the smoother everything will be. And there's a lot of games out there that support 90Hz refresh rate, so you're going to get a really nice smooth gaming performance from the Realme 7. And for those of you that don't know, if you have a high refresh rate, what tends to happen is your battery life starts to drain a bit quicker. But there's some good news here. In the box with the Realme 7 is a 30-watt fast charger, and inside the phone is a crazy 5000 milliamp hour battery, which is better than flagship level. And just to put that into perspective for you guys, the iPhone 11 Pro Max has a 4000 or just under 4000 milliamp hour battery and an 18-watt fast charger in the box. So the fact that Realme have put a battery that big in this phone and that charger in the box, that's a big deal. So both phones have face unlock, but on the Realme 7 we have a side mounted fingerprint reader and power button in one. And I've used some phones that have had some quite bad and slow side mounted fingerprint readers. This one is incredibly snappy and very efficient, and it doesn't miss hardly ever. So now with all that said, it's time to reveal the price on this thing. This phone is under £200, it's £179 for the base variant of the device. That's the 4GB of RAM and 64GB storage version. Now let's compare the key specs to the Realme 7 Pro. So inside the Realme 7 Pro, we have a more efficient processor in the form of the Qualcomm Snapdragon 720G, which is also a gaming chipset. Except this one, as standard, has 8GB of RAM and 128GB ROM. But here's a big difference. The screen itself is ever so slightly smaller, but it is in fact an OLED display and is slightly more pixel dense at 411 pixels per inch. And there's tons of reasons why people prefer OLED displays to IPS displays. The only downside here, in my opinion, is the refresh rate. You've got that 90Hz on the 7. On this one, you've got a 60Hz refresh rate, which is perfect for most people. But the real benefit of an OLED screen is better colors, better brightness, better darkness, and when pixels are black, the pixels are literally off and it's saving power. So you can actually switch this into dark mode and get further power savings from the device. And with that in mind, Realme have put a slightly smaller battery in here at 4500 milliamp hours, which is still bigger than the iPhone 11 Pro Max. But this is a really big deal now. In the box, we have a 65-watt super dart charger that's going to take you from 0 to 100% battery in just 34 minutes. Now that is incredibly fast. Remember that iPhone charger I was talking about earlier? 18 watts. This one is 65 watts. That is insane. So again, that's a better than flagship level spec there, and there are more flagship features. So there's an in-screen fingerprint reader. It's an optical fingerprint reader and it's very fast. You've also got dual stereo speakers built into the phone, and that is the difference between this and the 7. The 7 has a single downward firing mono speaker, whereas the 7 Pro has stereo speakers, which again, flagship feature. Now let's get into some of the similarities here between the two devices. Both phones have Gorilla Glass 3 screens. Both phones have plastic backs. but with this really cool frosted finish, and I really like the style of these. This color here on the 7 is mist blue, and the color here on the 7 Pro is mirror silver. And I really like that kind of two-tone design they've gone with there. And the great thing about this finish is it makes the phone very grippy and not so much of a fingerprint magnet like most phones are. Now, the fact that these have plastic backs means that it was quite easy for Realme to put NFC in both devices, which means you can use Google Pay on these phones, as well as all the other NFC stuff that you would do with them. Both phones have a headphone jack, which is a favorite feature of mine, and both phones have a hybrid SIM card tray with an SD card slot on board. So if you do decide to go for the base variant of the Realme 7 with 64GB of RAM, you can always put an SD card in there and double that, or go further if you want to with the memory. So that's a good feature. Now let's talk about the cameras on these. So there is going to be a difference. You spend a bit more money and you get what you pay for. So on the Realme 7 standard model, you still get this impressive 48 megapixel shooter, but on the Realme 7 Pro you get a Sony 64 megapixel sensor, which on paper should be better. But what do you think? Have a look at these two photos. Let me know what you think of the results here. Now both phones do rock a quad camera array that also houses an 8 megapixel ultra wide lens, something we didn't see on the Pixel from earlier this year, so that's good to see that on there. Let me know what you think of these results. Then you've got a 2 megapixel macro shooter, and for those of you who don't know what that's for, it's for getting really close to a subject to take a photo, so you get those really up close details. What do you think of these photos? And then the last sensor is a 2 megapixel depth sensor, which is really to create more blur in the background of those portrait shots. So it's nice to see that there as well. Now when it comes to the selfie shooters, both have the punch hole style cutout, if you didn't notice that earlier. And if you put them side by side, you'll notice the 7 Pro cutout is ever so slightly smaller than the regular 7, and there is a difference in hardware behind those as well. So the Realme 7 sensor is a 16 megapixel camera, whereas the 7 Pro is double that at 32 megapixels. So again, you pay a little bit more money and you get a little bit more for your money. So I really like both of these phones. I would say the base variant of the Realme 7 would be perfect for anybody who's looking for a solid phone with solid cameras, massive battery life, and stellar gaming performance. And you get that with that Helio G95 chipset and that high refresh rate there. And also the phone looks really awesome and it's well put together as well. But for a little more cash, I could definitely recommend the 7 Pro. It's a really perfect phone for that price range, $279. It's got an OLED screen, it's got faster charging, it's got better cameras, better speakers. It also feels a bit more premium in the hand, and it's going to be very good at gaming as well, and multimedia and all that other kind of stuff. Let me know which one of these you think is better value in the comments below. Also, let me know if you want to see a full camera comparison between these two devices. If I get enough requests, I will make that video for you guys. If you enjoyed this one, you want to find your way back to the channel in the future, make sure you're subscribed with the notifications on. And if you just subscribed, you're now one of the finest subscribers known to man. I'll see you guys in the next one. Don't be late.